Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jenny Gardner, and I would like to introduce our group of 7 women presenters, all members of the Christian Life Community of Australia, which is an Ignatian lay movement in the Catholic Church. Our roots go back to the 16th century. We are a lay community of men and women. We meet regularly in small groups in one another's homes to share our faith and our lives. Our current priorities are the offering to others of Ignatian spirituality, care of our environment, and walking with those who are poor and marginalised in our society. Groups meet throughout Australia and the world in 60 different countries. CLC acknowledges that we walk upon the traditional lands of First Nations peoples. We pay our respects to them today and recognise the continuing gift of their cultures to the life and spirit of Australia. In this recording we are presenting today, we have grappled with the question, what do we mean by Ignatian engagement? What you see is only part of a longer conversation, a conversation that we hope models Ignatian engagement. We're going to begin with the question, what does Ignatian engagement mean to us?
For me, it's conversation. Conversations with unexpected conversations with people that I meet, and I'm reminded of the story of Ignatius and his particular like of conversation, conversar, and how he would be invited out to dinner to talk to people, and he would listen to their conversations over dinner and then engage with them in the context of their lives.
I can say, and I've felt similarly. And you might say, well, is that just because you're a nice person? But I think because I've been in the Christian Life community where we do the Ignatian engagement and the format of the meetings where we learn to trust and speak authentically and listen, I think it actually prepares us. And it happens to us without even knowing, because I've noticed a difference from when I first joined CLC to like 6 months later, when I realised I was talking to any stranger in a real way. When I say talking, I mean listening and talking, and that's often the listening actually starts the talking, and just in general empathizing and not being a do-gooder, but it's just a more authentic thing than that.
For me, I think it's been more about the process of learning how to share and speak in a small group, like which is almost harder than a stranger on the street. And the conversation for me has been more like a mud heap that I get to leave at Kay's house every in the lounge room. It's very unformed, and there's no beginning or end.
And it's quite a complex conversation that's going on even within a CLC meeting, where for me, it was learning that I could have a safe community in which to share, so that I could then take that into the conversation with God. It was both an inner and an outer formation going on within a community of people that I learnt over time to trust.
The title of this conference really, I struggled with it. Ignatian Spirituality in a Time of Engagement. Well, to me, Ignatian Spirituality is about engagement. So I just was a bit perplexed by that. And I think when we talk about now is the time, I think now is the time for Ignatian Spirituality in a very important way in our world. With the plenary council, our church, the need for us to be discerning, and that call from Pope Francis to be a discerning people. And I just know through my experience of CLC the riches of it as I've grown in becoming more aware of God speaking in me and through others. And that, of course, presupposes that listening and sharing and prayer.
I've been in a CLC group for 35 years. I've seen people through a whole variety of life experiences, and I've been supported by them in the group through various life experiences. It's become a way of life for me to be present in that small group on a regular basis.
I'm thinking of when I first joined CLC, how it was possible for me to engage with other people who were willing to talk about their faith and were willing to ask hard questions and listen to different responses, different ways of reading a scripture, different ways of interpreting what they're feeling. And all of those things, I've learned so much over time from other people and their sharing, and being able to share what my journey has been.
I think also for CLC, you know, as a larger organisation, there is the ongoing wrestling with where we stand in terms of issues that challenge the broader society, and what is it that, if it informs our own spirituality, what is it that we can bring from that, and the process that CLC offers us in terms of formation to the wider causes of concern. And it may be towards our church, not just in terms of the plenary council, but certainly for issues such as that. It may be towards the rest of the world, and how much we take on board, and how does it affect our own spiritual journey together when we look at what Pope Francis is positioning us to think about in terms of our social and public responsibilities.
I think Ignatian engagement, the distinctive thing for me is that it causes me to be reflective. Be reflective and discern and learn about discernment. And so I'm much more intentional in the way I live my life. Don't know what others think about that.
No, I would agree. I think it the discerning aspect helps us to look for the greater good, for one thing, and also to determine, is the action that I'm taking giving life to me? Is it something that's moving me closer to God? You know, like, I think it's a very elemental question, and I think that's where the discernment really helps us to reflect. Like you were saying, Jenny, we reflect on what we can do, what we have done, and how it's moving us, and how it's moving as an action in the world.
I think it's always an outward-looking engagement too. You know, we're called to mission as individuals and as a community. We're always being invited to look outwards and respond to what's around us, rather than simply make our religion a personal, inward-looking thing. I think it's the opposite of that.
Although I think that word invitations come up several times with different people speaking, and I think there is that invitation to journey inwards and do the full spiritual exercises and things like that. And one way or another, it takes you inwards, but it gives you the strength to embrace the invitations to go outwards at the same time. And there's a plethora of invitations out there, and a lot of what I find I'm doing in CLC is I'm journeying with the people in my own CLC group with the challenges that they have in their daily life, their outreach, but also there's lots of invitations that are beyond that, like with migrants, or even some countries of the world, CLC people run schools and all sorts of things. So there's a huge amount of invitation to journey in your outreach with other people from CLC, and whether it be just in Australia or around the world, or just within your group, or that personal journey that you're accompanied on, even if you're going in a different direction to the other group members.
I also like what Anne said about sitting down to having dinner. I didn't know that about Ignatius. I just saw him in a person in a cave.
Yes, yeah. I love that story. They said he because of who he was and the reputation he was gaining, he'd be asked out to dinner and he'd sit there eating and not joining in. And I could just imagine the people who invited him thinking, we asked this fellow to come and talk to us and he's just sitting there eating his dinner. But he was listening, and it was that sacred listening to the conversations going on around him. And when he finished eating his dinner, he then joined in with the people, and he was able to converse with them in the context of their lives, because he had that deep sense of listening to what they were talking about.
Been talking about that a group with which we are used to sharing, or we know well, but one of the important, most special things to me is that I've been fortunate enough to attend some world assemblies and to be with CLC people from around the world and have that experience of listening to people. And sometimes the language barriers is huge, but the sense of coming to a decision as a very large group. So I think Jenny used that term about a way of life, and you connect with people because there's a shared way of life. You know nothing about them before that point, but there is that shared way of life which enables, or has enabled, those groups to come to decisions, and that is such a powerful experience to be part of.
I've certainly had that experience, Kay, of going to a World Assembly of CLC, and I think for me the experience of sitting with a group of people from 6 different countries and actually sharing openly and honestly was quite profound. I find it hard to describe the sense of connectedness and sense of humanity that experience offers.
And I think it's important to remember too that what our Ignatian spirituality brings to us in terms of engagement as a very foundational step is to value our life, the reality in which we live and experience, and in the ordinary things of our life.
Maybe at this point, as we usually do in a meeting, we might just take a minute to reflect on what each person said and notice, what's really touched me about our conversation. What am I sort of finding resonates with me as I reflect on what each of the others have said. I was struck by what you said, Julie, about coming with unformed feelings, maybe unformed ideas. I often find myself sharing in the meeting and realizing as I'm sharing what I'm really saying, that somehow that naming of where God's been in my life, what's been happening, just enables me to see it differently as I speak.
Found this process today refreshing, just because I feel like it's restating to me that we're all journeying together, and there's so much shared stuff. We're all on different pages maybe, but There's so much commonality and accompaniment and richness to be invited to.
One of the words that came to me was the sense of wholeness about the experience of CLC, that it's not just developing one's spiritual experiences as a kind of personal soul development, and it's not just about prayer, and it's not just about trying to work out how to live a good life in one's everyday circumstance, or to reach out to the rest of the world and somehow help redeem it. But there is a wholeness, and it springs from the personal all the way out.
I think for me, the image is still that dinner time conversation, because actually, it's not because I'm hungry. It is this kind of it's like a reverse hospitality. You know, the idea that you would go to, like you were just saying, Di, that you go to another, or that you are somehow meant to receive the world's, you know, stuff and try to do something with it is a complete reverse of what you were describing. What struck me about it, and that you eat the food that someone else has given you, sit and listen and absorb the environment that you're in, and then bring something reflective, intentional, I think you've all said, but also authentic to what the journey has been up until that point. And I think that's a lovely, for me, an image to take away even from this conversation, that it's less burdensome, actually. More joyful.
I love that word, joyful. You've just used, Julie. And, you know, as I reflect on this time together, it's a sense of privilege and gratitude. I know when I first went along to a CLC gathering, which is in the UK 40 odd years ago, what struck me was not the knowledge that I got, but looking at the people and thinking, wow, they're fantastic people, you know, and wonderful people. So I thought, well, if that's what CLC produces, it must be good.
I just have a sense of the passion we all have for CLC. And I came to it through my general practitioner, who I didn't know about CLC at that time. And we used to have spiritual conversations. And used to hear, I said I'd get physical healing and spiritual healing. And I didn't realise that he was working me up to introduce me to CLC. So all those conversations with him led me to CLC. And now I couldn't imagine my life without it.
Yeah, there's a word that didn't actually come out in the conversation, but it's coming out now for me, thinking about everything that I've heard other people say. And one of those is loyalty. There's a wonderful sense of loyalty to each other, loyalty to the group, loyalty to the process, loyalty to the richness of the spirituality that's been going on for traditions, for centuries. And yet within that loyalty, there's a great deal of freedom and that joy that Julie spoke of. You know, there's an excitement that continues, even though there's so many things that are repeated and familiar and comfortable. There's always new sparks and a deep desire to engage with one another in this journey that we share.